How did automobile racing develop into what it is today? Let's go over the history, starting with the engines and cars themselves. The first engine did not run on petrol, but steam. It was built in 1698 by the English engineer Thomas Savery. This was able to start the Industrial Revolution and make way for steamboats and trains, but it made a poor fit for small vehicles such as cars. A little more than a century later, in 1806, inventor Francois Isaac de Rivas created the first internal combustion engine. This was powered by hydrogen gas. In 1861, the German engineer Nikolaus Otto built the first gasoline-powered engine. This design was further refined in 1876 to use a 4-stroke piston cycle known as the Otto cycle. Otto's new engine allowed for the development of the cars we know and love today. In 1885, based on Otto's technology, came the first ever gasoline-powered car. It was invented by another German engineer named Carl Friedrich Benzi, who was the future co-founder of Mercedes-Benz. But there were other vehicles before this. Original cars weren't powered by gasoline. The first car in history was a 3-wheeled steam vehicle. It was built for the French Army in 1769 by inventor Nicolas Joseph Cugnot. The next new source of fuel was electricity, made by Robert Anderson of Scotland in 1832. This car was powered by non-rechargeable batteries. It didn't go far at all, but the future of electric cars was very promising. When Carl Benz finally began commercial production of his vehicles in 1886, the world started using gasoline as their primary fuel source for vehicles, but more importantly, more people had access to cars because of this commercialization. This was the beginning of the automotive industry, and so was the beginning of automotive racing. This began in the streets of Europe in an uncontrolled manner. It was an opportunity for people to put this new technology to the test. The first organized race was in 1894 from Paris to Rouen, France. The total distance was 50 miles, with the winner clocking in at an average speed of only 10.2 miles per hour. The first organized race in the US took place on Thanksgiving Day in 1895. It was from Chicago to Evanston, Illinois, and back, a distance of 54 miles. Open track races in Europe, which were usually town to town, were a normal occurrence until 1903. That's when a Paris to Madrid race caused multiple accidents. After this incident, open races on the street became banned in many parts of Europe. The first closed road race happened in 1898. It was called the Course de Périgueux and had a distance of 90 miles each lap. The more modern version of international racing competitions first started at the turn of the 20th century. That's when the owner of the New York Herald, James Bennett, put forward a trophy to be used for a competition between national racing clubs around the world. Each nation would race cars using parts made in their own country. The Automobile Club de France was the first to adhere to this proposition. They had the first James Bennett trophy races in 1901, 1902, and 1903. By 1904, the national racing clubs for each country constructed a governing authority. They called it the Association Internationale des Automobiles Clubs, RECONNIS. They assigned each nation a differentiating color: British, green; French, blue; German, white; and Italian, red. The admission into the races was done by car manufacturers. They allowed up to 3 cars to be driven per team by highly skilled drivers. In 1906, French car manufacturers snubbed the James Bennett Trophy races because they wanted to enter more than 3 cars at a time. This led to the first ever Grand Prix that same year, which was held in Le Mans, France. The race took 2 days to complete with a distance of 65 miles each lap. A Grand Prix is now the standard form of auto racing. In January 1906, the first official racetrack was built in Espendale Park, Victoria, Australia. Although the first official track is often confused with the Brooklands racetrack in England, Espendale Racetrack was built a year before. This used to be an old horse racing venue, and it was converted by the longtime horse trainer James Robert Crook into a commercial track for automobiles. In 1908, pits showed up in racing. These are the areas off the main track where cars go for a pit stop or tune up during a race. This is crucial for maintaining the vehicle's condition in a short period. The fastest pit stop recorded today is a time of 1.8 seconds. Now that's fast. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, one of the most well-known racetracks, was built in 1909. It's 2.5 miles long and home to the Indianapolis 500 competition, 500 meaning the race is 500 miles long. In 1911, they hosted their first ever Indy 500. It was won by Ray Harron, who was an engineer as well as driver. He came out of retirement just for this race, and he won with an average speed of 75 miles per hour. in the period before World War I, race cars were usually the prototype for the next year's stock production vehicles. However, after the war, racing had too many specialized requirements for production cars. But at times, high-performance stock vehicles were modified by removing their original bodies and equipped with specialized seats, fuel tanks, and tires to compete in races. Around the 1920s, Prohibition had just started in the US, and so had the rise of American street racing. Bootleggers who made and sold alcohol illegally needed a form of transportation for their product. So they turned to cars, but not any old cars. They heavily modified vehicles to give them a significant advantage on the road, specifically for outrunning the police. Because of the deadly impact of high-speed driving during this period, American street racing became illegal in the early 20s. When the age of Prohibition came to an end in 1933, most of the bootleggers still had a knack for speed, so they continued to race their cars on the streets despite the law. Interestingly enough, most drivers for NASCAR were ex-bootleggers. When the organization was established in 1947, their early races happened on the beaches of Daytona, Florida. In the 1930s, they would race stock cars on the beaches unofficially until they founded the governing authority, which they called the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, or NASCAR. Around the same period in the 1930s, racing hot rods became extremely popular in the desert of Southern California. These hot rods were designed to accelerate as quickly as possible. The drivers would race at quarter-mile sections of flat ground from one end to the other. This is called a drag race. These cars started as stock cars with minor modifications, but they turned into unique and specialized vehicles, each fitted with insane amounts of horsepower. Meanwhile, Grand Prix races were still booming. French and Italian cars won pretty much race after race up to 1934. From then till 1939, Germany, who were Nazis at the time, dominated the racing arena. Then, because of the struggles of World War II, the whole racing world went quiet until the war receded. Post-war, in 1946, the governing body of the national racing teams, originally called the Association Internationale des Automobiles Clubs Reconnaissance, changed its name to what they're now called the Fédération Internationale d'Automobile, or the FIA. In 1947, the FIA established rules and guidelines for various tiers of racing known as formulas. In this context, the word formula means the regulations dictating the race requirements specific cars had to adhere to. Initially, the highest tier was titled Formula or Formula One. The first race to use these Formula One rules was at the 1946 Turin Grand Prix in Italy, even before these rules were officially set in stone in 1947. By 1950, Formula One racing would go worldwide. That year was the first Grand Prix World Championship. It included 7 races in 7 different countries: Great Britain, Monaco, the US, Switzerland, Belgium, France, and Italy. It went from May 13, 1950 to September 3, which is a period of 16 weeks. The winner was on Team Italy and drove an Alfa Romeo. His name is Guy Ceferino. At this point, racing was widely organized throughout the world. It would only continue to develop as technology progressed. With the foundational innovations made by the pioneers of the racing industry, up to 1950, its development has skyrocketed exponentially in the last 70 years. In the present day, the same organizations still exist, such as NASCAR, Formula One, and the FIA. But just to show you how far this technology has progressed, the top speed of the first gasoline-powered car from Carl Benz in 1885 is a mere 10 miles per hour. Compare that to the fastest stock car available today, the Koenigsegg Jesko Absolute, which has a top speed of an astounding 330 miles per hour. The best Formula One cars of 2023 have an average speed of 138 miles per hour. They can accelerate to 63 miles per hour in 2.4 seconds, with turning speeds at 186 miles per hour, which is wild to imagine. The progress we've made in automobile racing is enormous, but that's only thanks to our predecessors and their remarkable innovation.